Hello guys, welcome to the episode. Just a wee reminder that we are now on Patreon. You can find us at patreon.com/somelaugh, where you can get lots of benefits, including 2 extra episodes every month, I believe.
Well, episode once every 2 weeks at the moment. We are looking to increase that, and you can get that for as little as £3 a month, Stephen.
Of course you can, Mark. Stu's currently away at the toilet.
We're recording this mid-episode while Stuart is at the bathroom.
And you can also get access to the live shows, can't you, Mark?
Yeah, so the 1 December's already up there. The one we recently recorded at Glee in April will be up shortly, if not already. And you can get access to that and access for tickets for future live shows, including the ones we'll plan on doing at Edinburgh Festival. You'll get priority for those tickets. So we are also doing live shows at the Fringe, doing our own individual stand-up shows to do. Check those out as well. But that's basically about it for now. And aside from that, guys, enjoy today's episode. Welcome to the Some Laugh podcast.
It could be like, oh, that was some laugh, or there was just some laughs.
Well, no promising all laugh.
No, there's going to be some.
It's some laugh.
Saying you've been doing a lot of press because Guilt Series 3 is on its way.
Yeah.
Yep.
So obviously this is a much more amateurish vibe.
That's fine.
No one's done research.
Why would you? Why would you?
You know, we're not going to ask you, you know, what are the sort of things, because we always get asked the same things in interviews of like, you know, how'd you come up with your material? How'd you get heckled? It's always the same. Is there like a writing equivalent of
that? Where'd you get all your ideas, obviously? And so the character, is that you? Is that you? Yeah.
Oh, right, yeah.
A bit of you in there? Not like, what, that septuagenarian female gangster? Yeah, so, I don't know. Yeah, where'd you get your ideas, I suppose?
Yeah, there's a sort of also running thing where we get guests on and I've not watched the things or whatever, but I have watched Guilt and I have watched The Gold as well, both great.
Steve's over-prepared for this interview.
Yeah, if anything.
Yeah.
Loved Guilt, so how did season 3 or series 3, we should probably call it, how did that go, like the writing process and all that? Was it good?
It was pretty mad, to be honest, because I last year I made The Gold while writing Guilt.
Right.
And then made Guilt while editing The Gold.
Right.
It was insane. Yeah, it was ridiculous. It was sort of, I mean, on paper, brilliant, incredible, and been working towards it for 20 odd years. But in reality, it was mentally challenging. It just sort of hard, you know, it's just hard work. And it's like, you know, there was 3 or 4 months of doing 7 days a week and, you know, evenings and things. But it was, I think in some weird way, it helped the writing of Guilt, because I didn't really have time to second guess myself at all. And I just had to sort of batter it out, you know, just sort of commit to a story and write it out. I didn't have time to play with options or anything. So it was kind of, but a lot of Guilt was written, the Guilt 3rd series was written back of taxis, airports and trains and things. Yeah, just trying to get it done. But.
A lot of scenes set on like trains and stuff then.
Yeah, it's a whole megabus episode. It doesn't make sense at all.
So and you're also producing these shows as well, or were you just writing Guilt, or you produced that as well?
Yeah, well, I've got an exec producer credit, and I'm pretty hands-on, to be honest, as a writer. So I kind of, on the set a fair bit. Not always, you know, if it's like a day of people getting in and out of cars, I'll go and do something else. But it's, but yeah, they're a lot, and that's a sort of role that I've built up over the years, really.
Was that always the plan?
Yeah, I always wanted to kind of be a bit. It's a strange thing writing, though, isn't it? It's like, you know, I always think a director gets their first show, and they do the same job on that show as their 10th show, but with a writer, your first show, you know, you're never going to get that big. Not big, but sort of more creative, oversighty sort of position. It's just not going to happen. You're sort of so pleased to be in the door. You know, I remember when I started off thanking people that I could go to the set. Oh, thanks for having me. You know, can I park over there? Just right beside the camera. You know, you're just like you won a competition. You know, And I think over time, you sort of start to think, well, you know, I'd like to maybe be a bit more involved in some of these other conversations.
Yeah. Have you ever wanted to be in front of the camera or
acting?
Yeah.
No, although Jack's thing he did at Christmas with BBC Scotland, the 100 Years of Scottish Comedy.
Jack Docherty.
Jack Docherty,
I can't remember what it was called. But it was a BBC Scotland channel.
The clip show.
Yeah, but what was funny with that is they did a bit on Bob Servant, and one of the very few clips they showed, I'm one of the extras.
Oh, right, wow.
I played second policeman, and I'm there. So I'm immortalised in this 100 years of Scottish comedy. And I'm there bright red and Bob Servant's extension, just try not to fall over. So
you've written that into your contract.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But it's funny that I did 2 scenes where I played this copper, and the other one, I was me and this other extra had to walk just in the far distance of Broughty Ferry Beach in the Bob Servant. And I was dressed up, and the guy's like, he said, you're the writer. And I went, yeah, I know, I'm a bit silly, but I just thought it'd be fun. But he went, well, just don't worry, mate. So honestly, I've done loads. I've done Taggart. It's absolutely fine, right? And we're both in these big police uniforms on a hot day in Broughty Ferry. He went, honestly, don't worry, mate. We've just got to walk along. It'll be fine. So I went, all right, fine. So I'm walking along. 5 seconds later, he has a panic attack. Collapses on the sand. I'm having a wave over the night. And he said to me, like, oh, it's just the collar. The collar's ridiculous. I've never had to work with a collar like that.
At least you were there. If you had to write him out, you could just figure it out.
I think we only need one policeman actually now.
Promote myself.
Maybe on Target he played a character that had a panic attack.
That is interesting what you say though about like getting more creative control as the writer over the process when it comes to filming and stuff. And like, is that something? How do you build up that kind of like sort of like the clout to be able to kind of have that say? And is there directors and stuff that would be resistant to a writer coming in that way?
Probably, but I think you've got to get a bit more experience and realise that it's always collegiate and there's always like a team, and you've got to kind of be respectful of that. But I think you've got to realise as well the kind of conversations, the creative conversations that you should really be involved in as the writer, and others where it's a bit more negligible, really, and not feel that you're a kind of control freak and you want to get involved in everything. But I think once they realise that you're talking in a kind of positive and constructive way, and there's a sort of not egotistical side of it. You just think, look, I've got, can we just have a chat about this? And, I've got something to say that I think's useful. I think, good directors would welcome that, because then they feel that they're working towards some unified creative vision sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
It feels to me like watching Guilt, correct me if I'm wrong, but like you lived in Edinburgh for a while, right?
Yeah.
And like the way Edinburgh's shot on screen, and like between that and like the music choices and how it looks and everything, it feels like someone's vision. Like it feels cohesive. Do you know what I mean? Of like, I imagine you were in all those conversations.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, music's a big part of it. I mean, there's lots that other people have to bring. Robbie McKillop and Pat Harkins, the directors were in Guilt, just incredible job. I think just looks just cinematic, and I think visually punches above its weight so significantly in terms of the budget. Like, looks amazing, I think. Particularly the first and third series. Second series, we were under COVID restrictions, so it was quite difficult. But I think this series looks incredible as well. But yeah, the music and the kind of voice of it. I mean, it's a very personal show for me, Guilt. I lived in Edinburgh for a long time. There's lots of themes and things in the show that are probably from my life, elements of the characters and things. But that voice is so distinctive. There's only so much you can do as the writer, and then the performances are amazing. That particularly that humor and drama, kind of the way that interplays, like. There's only it's like being a football manager, really. There's only so much you can do once the players sort of go out on the pitch. And I do think, like, if one of those key performances had been slightly off, particularly with the humor, like, as if they lean just a bit too far into the humor, the kind of drama collapses. Really, you don't believe the characters anymore, and it feels a bit too comedic. So like Mark and Jamie and Eamon and Greg and all the others just get that balance just right. So it's great.
And you're speaking about you're doing it during COVID. How did you find that? Did you have to, when you were writing like second series, I take it, did you have to keep that in mind when you were writing?
Yeah.
Was there certain locations you maybe couldn't use, or and a certain amount of people in a scene and stuff?
Exactly.
Did you have
people
to...
in the scene. That was the biggest thing, Stephen. So it's like probably halfway through writing it, it became COVID was happening. And it became clear that we probably would get to shoot it, but under pretty restrictive conditions. So wrote a lot of two-handers, quite tried to limit the amount of locations. Basically couldn't do any driving scenes. If you watch the second series of Guilt, I don't think there's any driving scenes, or it'll be people
Right.
getting in a car and going, right then, let's go. Turn the key, cut, because you just, once they were moving, it was an absolute nightmare because you'd have a camera crew in the back with them and
Right.
confined space, and even, or all the windows open, it's still all the regulations. So
Wow.
it was really quite limiting. And I think you feel it, it feels a wee bit theatrical, second series, because it's just a lot of two-handers with a lot of
Like
conversation.
little plays and stuff.
Yeah, it kind of does, and I think you get away with it a bit, but it feels a bit claustrophobic in places, which sometimes helps you dramatically. But I think overall, and the big thing with this series, the third one, is get out now, be a bit bolder, and get out and see other areas of Scotland and things like that.
Was that always the plan? Just end on series 3? Was
Yeah.
that what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I thought it'd be nice to have a trilogy, and have like first series Guilt, second series Revenge, third series Redemption, and then finish. And I also think that we've ended strongly, hopefully. But I also feel like I've just got nothing really in the tank really anymore for those guys. It's like I don't have anything else I want to know about those characters.
Yeah.
So if that's me as the writer, why would I subject the viewer to any more of it? And also just, it's a lot of story. A BBC hour is a lot, if it sounds ridiculous, but it's long, it's like 58, 59 minutes of story. And if you want to write something with a bit of pace, you're just burning through
Sure.
story. And also, there's only so many things that can happen to one set of brothers. Otherwise, it gets a bit ridiculous. So I feel that we've got to reach a natural end.
Can you tell us a wee bit about what series 3 is about? A wee teaser.
Yeah, I mean, it's the brothers, very much driven by the brothers again. I think in series 2 they had a kind of bit of time apart, and I think that's actually been really nice. It feels quite fresh to have them back together, like fresh conflict. They feel a bit older as well, which I think is quite interesting. So driven by the brothers, and we meet them in America, but they're quite quickly back in Scotland, and then there's a whole new storyline, but it all kind of interplays. And there's a new area of Edinburgh which I go into, which is the banking sector, which is something I thought I was quite interested in.
Yeah.
Having lived in Edinburgh and knowing that's such a big part of the city, so I kind of bring that in. And then some characters come back. From second series, from the first series, some characters come back. It was nice, it's nice writing to an end. I think who would it be amazing to come back if there's a narrative reason for them to do so. And it was so. Yeah, I think it's its own story, but there's lots of other things tied up and lots of kind of reference backwards as well.
Cool. Sounds good.
Can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
Have you got any idea? Like, I mean, I'm sure you can't talk about any of this stuff, so we can just cut it. But like, is there stuff that you're working on currently that you're excited about? Or
Yeah, well, writing scripts and waiting for production decisions, hopefully. So yeah.
Now you've got your own production company. Can you just
wave it
produce
through?
your own scripts? Get
Well,
them
I
through.
could, but I could only play it on my TV, so I don't think the financial model would work if I just shot it. But yeah, it's no, it's great. Tannadice Pictures. It's been fun to set it up, and I managed to get us. We co-produce the gold and things. So yeah, it's great. I'm thinking of taking an advertising board out of Tannadice.
Yeah.
Off Tannadice Pictures.
Yeah, you should.
That would confuse people, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dundee United fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're from Dundee originally. I was going to say, mentioned this before we started recording, but I'd done a gig in Broughty Ferry. Is that roughly where you were from?
I'm from Broughty Ferry, yeah.
Worst gig one of the worst gigs I've ever done in my
I
life.
can't even think where that would have happened.
I've done that.
Grace's.
Yeah,
was it?
I've done it.
Where's that?
Broughty.
Grace's.
Grace is
It's like
right.
a restaurant.
Grace's.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a
It's a
restaurant,
restaurant, so it's not set up for a gig. People eating their dinner. I'm interrupting their dinner. The worst lineup you've ever seen in your life, just full of like newbies basically doing 10 minutes each. And at the time I was doing this joke about Jesus dating, and,
Cutting edge.
the big punchline was net fish and chill, which I still stand by. I think that's good stuff, guys.
Actually, we need to cut that out because that's in production at the moment as well.
Yeah.
Steve's ready to even get
Feature film of Netflix and chill.
And just this old lady in the front row, or the front booth or whatever it was, just shook her head and she was like, "Goodness me!"
So they eating as you're
I think they were finishing up. I think they were eating their puddings, maybe.
Good luck. Read the third series of Guilt in that audience and see how you get on. Tighten it up.
So yeah,
What
that's
about Dundee? What's the stand-up scene like there? Is it?
there's
There's sort of, I really enjoy gigging in Dundee. I went to uni in Dundee, so I was
right,
like
right.
going back. But there's not too many gigs.
When I've gigged the least probably in Scotland.
It's kinda-
City, I've gigged
there's
least
not
in
a
there.
comedy
They
club.
do have icebreaker comedy, they call it, which is they used to do gigs in cafes and like little ones. They're always really fun, but there's just not much of a scene. When I started, I was in my last semester at uni in Dundee, and I didn't know how to do comedy or how you went about it. So I set up a Google alert with the words Comedy Dundee. So whenever any event or anything came up with those keywords, I'd get an email. Literally, the only thing that happened was every couple of weeks, I'd get an email from the same woman on Gumtree selling VHS copies of Crocodile Dundee. That was it. So there's more gigs than that.
It's funny you mention that because we actually found a gig on Gumtree back years ago. That was like one of my first gigs off Gumtree, and it's like an insane way to go about trying to get gigs and stuff.
Because I don't think either of us can even remember why we were even looking on Gumtree for gigs.
Someone from my work sent me the Gumtree ad for it, and I was like, "Oh, this must be how you get gigs." But
it's weird that I don't know if you remember that because you lived a life before you were a writer, and like that brings back that feeling of me like when you're like, I'd love to be a comedian, but I've literally no fucking clue how to go about it. Like, how did that like? Did you have any idea how to go about being a writer?
Not really. I wanted to be a writer from quite a young age, but provincial city, pre-internet as well when I was younger. So it's like, how would you possibly go about this? The only kind of glimmers I had of that kind of creative life was I used to read the Dundee Courier every day, and the Dundee Courier was very traditional paper. Like it had the small ads on the front page. The front page was the small ads. So it'd be like 9/11. And people are selling sewing machines on the front cover of the Dundee Courier. But inside, the two things I look out for would sometimes be about Brian Cox or Ricky Ross and Deacon Blue, and about how Dundee's Ricky or Dundee's Brian has just got this new, he's on top of the pops or got a new film or whatever. And I was like, God, that was the little glimmer that people could sort of do.
Someone's done it.
Somehow, And then I just, didn't know how to do it. But then I wrote for Dundee United football fanzine when I was young. And that was, it was 12, 13, 14, selling outside the ground. And even just seeing my name in print in that kind of wonky, I was like, and that felt like a sort of...
What stuff did you write when you were that age for the fanzine?
I wrote, so I used to take Roy of the Rovers comic strips and I'd Tipex out all the speech bubbles. And then I'd just write in really offensive comments about Dundee players. So like, Roy of the Rover would be like consoling a crying fan, and I'd write some abuse about Jim Duffy in the speech bubble. So, and in many ways it's been downhill ever since. But kind of, so
early memes really, isn't it?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I wrote sort of football, very early days of football websites, write for them. But then I was sort of mid-20s in Edinburgh working in my mate's nightclub and just trying to find, I had no qualifications. So kind of just always trying to do something that slightly led to someone else. And so the football websites, by writing for them, eventually I got, I think about 20 years ago, got my first sort of journalistic commission, which was to write an article for 442, which was the football magazine. Yeah. Ralph Milne, an old Dundee United player, sadly no longer with us, who had this tumultuous period at Man United, and I took him back to Old Trafford and wrote this feature, and that was my first journalistic piece. And then just wrote magazines. So wrote for, and then started working with the Scottish newspapers doing match reports, which was brilliant. Absolutely loved that. Sort of Scotsman and Herald and Scotland and Sunday doing lower division match reports, which is brilliant. Like 300 words on St Mirren Ross County. And like as a writer, you learn so much from that because it's every word counts. You have to tell the story of the game, but this was just before you used to email in the match report. So I still had to phone in the report 20 minutes after the end of the game. So if there's a last minute winner, your whole report's screwed. I remember doing a game. I think it was Clyde against St Mirren or something, where the team was 1-0 up, and I'd written a whole report. Comfortable victory for the side and so on, and the other team scored 2 goals in injury time, and I had to fucking rewrite the whole thing in 20 minutes. So it's great, like practice. And remember another thing that happened was I did Livingston played someone, and I wrote a report for the Scotland Sunday, won 1-0, and David Fernandes scored the winner, right? And I said in my report, finished with classic Gallic flair by the Frenchman, right? And then the next day, I was really pleased with myself. I got to Scotland on Sunday, and the sub editor, and it just said a cool finish by the Spaniards. that was the level of research I did. But I loved it, just going around Scotland, getting the train, going to these little grounds. Queen of the South I used to go to a lot, and when my granddad lived down there and stuff. So that was where I kind of started off in football writing.
It's crazy that would lead to where you are now, really.
Yeah, it was. Well, I was kind of helped by the fact that I kept doing things that were financially dying, right? So I had to do something else. So I loved that freelance journalism stuff. I really enjoyed it. And I started doing interviews, and I'd go and interview players and managers. And but it was just, even when I was doing it, the freelance journalism fees were dropping, and you were getting less and less work. And then I went to work for the magazines, and I worked for the men's mags for a few years, which was good fun. Your FHM and Maxim.
Yeah, how was that?
That was great. It was just.
What year would this be?
Oh,
You try to work out if you'd read those
If I
particular.
got Abby Titmus in the front. And just tried to
yeah, probably about 15 years ago, maybe. And I did. That was just mad. I was just like going off and doing. I'd spend a couple of days with the Happy Mondays, or I'd go and I'd do a lot of football stuff, or just an interesting story that I'd found in the paper, and I'd go and write a kind of humor piece, and but all that stuff. Yeah, bands, football, humor stuff. It was brilliant, and Front magazine I worked for. Do you remember Front? That was the poor boy. That was very much the poor man's men's mag. But they did they would do like 12 articles. I mean, they were run at one point by a couple of guys that were basically Millwall football casuals. It was so, and they used to give you commissions as if they were organising like a hit. They'd go, come and meet us in the pub, and you'd go and meet them in this dodgy pub in Elephant and Castle. And they're going, right, you guys, 500 quid, right, and this stuff. And they're talking about like interviewing like Amir Khan, but they're doing drugs run. There's just so many cowboys involved in that men's mag world, and they were all dying again, because Nuts and Zoo came in, and that just killed the monthly magazines, because I was writing 3,000-4,000 word pieces, and that just all disappeared overnight, and it just became bikini led sort of stuff. So again, because that I had to kind of find something else, and then I'd interviewed this guy, Elliot Castro from Glasgow, credit card fraudster, for Maxim, and I wrote his biography, and that was my first book. So that kind of got me into writing books.
Oh, wow.
And was the plan to write books from?
Yeah, I wanted to. Yeah, at that point, I wanted to. I mean, TV is something I'd love to have done, but I wouldn't have dared think that was a way that things could have gone. So, but books, I was really interested in. I used to read a lot of non-fiction. In those days, there was all this stuff about great, particularly American writers writing these really interesting non-fiction stories, and a lot of them get made into films and things. I always remember there's a guy called Ben Mesrich, and he wrote all these really good stories in America, and several got made into like Hollywood films. And I remember reading this profile of him, and it was like he was from Boston, and it was like he had this big penthouse apartment that looked out over Boston Harbor. And I was reading this in my little flat in Edinburgh. I always remember it said that he had a NASA level telescope right, on his balcony. And I was like, when this book comes out, I'm going to get a massive flat. I'm going to get a fucking massive telescope. And then my book came out, and I could barely get a set of binoculars. Blink and you miss it. But so I wanted to write these books. But again, books. And then I wrote a couple of novels. And I enjoyed all that. But I think I always felt if I could just work my way to some sort of screenwriting would be amazing. So
it's amazing you mentioned about you kind of started out reading the Courier, and it was obviously about Brian Cox and stuff like that, who obviously starred in Bob Servant. And I actually read that when Bob Servant came out the telly show, he wrote it was like a scathing article about it from Bob Servant. Is that like to promote the show?
Yeah, I wrote a really, really critical review of the Bob Servant show for the Dundee Courier as Bob Servant. I think the title was like "What a Stitch Up," about how he'd been really badly treated, and but A. Gill wrote a similar review, but I don't think that was a joke.
That's got to be a sort of badge of honour to get a bad review for a cunt like him.
Don't speak ill of the dead, man. That was. I remember he said it was. Well, I remember he said, Gil, it's about as funny as tossing the caber or something. And I thought that's such a bad line. Actually, make me feel better about the negative review. He'd written something so bad within his review.
Yeah, I hate it when reviewers try and be funny.
Yeah,
they always fuck it up.
Yeah, well, and he kind of. I always think with him, and a few others. It's interesting. I always think it's interesting they wrote for the Sunday papers, because I think there was a lot of schadenfreude in that. And I think it was always people who were going back to work on the Monday, doing a job they didn't particularly like, and wanted to read about people who had taken a chance and done something creative, fucking it up, fucking it up. And bizarrely, I saw Eagle once at Nice Airport in the south of France, and I saw him, and I got on the same flight as him. And as he was getting off, this woman went over to him and she went, "Oh, I love your work and your columns." He went, "Oh, thanks very much." And she went, "I love it when you really go for them." And what I thought was interesting about that is he looked a bit dismayed, because he obviously thought, "Well, no, I'm a really good writer."
Yeah.
But that's the reality.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of his fans liked. The fact he would just fucking destroy.
Wow.
You're more likely to read a 1-star than a 3-star, though.
I know
That's
you
the whole
are.
thing, innit?
I know.
Do you think any of the football players that you had reviewed over the years have thought that?
David Livingston site at an airport.
You're bumped into Jim Duffy.
Jim Duffy's never recovered. He still has nightmares about that Roy of the Rovers. Roy of the Rovers strip.
But that must have been a mad thing to come full circle and end up working with Brian Cox and stuff like that. And like when you were doing Bob Servant, like you're talking earlier on about being hands on in terms of like when it's getting filmed and stuff like that. Was that the case with Bob Servant?
Well, it was my first show, so not so much, but I was there. And also comedy, as you know, you're there a lot more actually just to chuck in little alts or work out things that aren't working. Drama's a bit more the dialogue sort of in with the bricks. But so Bob Servant, I was there throughout, and it was brilliant. It was just magical for me, because it was like I couldn't believe that I was making a television show, and I was making it in my hometown in Broughty Ferry. I'd stay at my mum and dad's, and in the morning I'd get up and walk around to Bob Servant's house and walk past the newsagent where I had a paper round,
It must be so surreal, that.
Yeah, I'd go for a pint in the ferry after, and it was just, and loads of people I knew would be walking past the set, walking their dogs and things. It was my mum and dad came down, and it was my mum and dad are in the opening credits of Bob Servant. Like he bangs on this shop window, and my mum goes like this, and so it's that was great. Yeah.
Has the town really taken it to heart?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, I think that but I'd get people coming over and seeking me out to say they didn't like it for many years. Purposefully crossing a pub to let me know. Thanks, mate. Cheers. Thanks. Have a good night.
I never understand that mentality of
It's
people.
crazy.
Not fun. But also that quite Dundonian thing to say, I didn't like it. I'll tell you the episode I like the least. You've not got a remote control, mate.
It's like such a Scottish mentality, that, to me. I don't know why, but...
And did you get much time with Brian Cox? Or
Yeah.
How was he to work with?
Great. Yeah, he's brilliant. He's been hugely influential for me and supportive. I saw him a couple of weeks ago. I see him all the time, but he's
Amazing.
He's great. I mean, that was Bob Servant. There was this bizarre succession of kind of serendipity and luck that got that thing together. So, first of all, I'd written the first Bob Servant book, Delete This at Your Peril, and it went out with this little publisher in London. It just didn't. They thought it was funny, but didn't really know what to do with it, and it was blink and you miss it. Like sold all right in Dundee, and that was it was out of print.
Yeah,
like, months out of print. And then I just went back to doing what I was doing, and then my mate got in touch and said, "Have you seen Esquire magazine?" And Esquire magazine had done this thing called the funniest books ever written, and they'd asked authors to suggest them. So all these authors, famous authors, were saying like Bret Easton Ellis and P.G. Wodehouse and things, and Irvine Welsh said, "Bob Servant, delete this at your peril." And I was so confused. Like it was out of print. I didn't know how he got it. And the pub I worked in Edinburgh, one of the sales reps had given a copy, knew Irvine, and had given it to Irvine.
Wow.
So this was just this included in this list of. So I went to the Scottish publisher with that article and said, like, would you consider reprinting it? Just give me a little buttons of an advance, but put this quote on the front. And they said, let's do it. So they did that, and it was that version that caught on and got serialised, and Guardian sold all right and stuff. And it was that version that BBC Scotland got hold of, just from Irvine doing that,
Wow.
in the book. And then, so I wrote, Owen Bell at BBC Scotland got in touch, and I wrote the scripts for the radio, and saying, look, we could do with a decent name if we want to try and get this made. I was in a pub watching Dundee United Rangers with Scottish Cup quarter final. We won 1-0. The ball went in off Davy Robertson's arse. He ran in and closed down the keeper, and it went in off his arse. And we went, anyway, there was one other United fan in the pub. was like a Rangers pub, and they started chatting to him, had mutual friends. Bizarrely, he'd been given the Bob Seven book for Christmas by his mum.
Wow.
And he said, so who would you want to play him? And I said, well, it's a bit of a pipe dream, but Brian Cox. He went, well, I know Brian. I thought, well, I'll call his bluff. So I gave the guy the book. 2 months later, Owen gets in touch, said, I've just had the oddest email from Brian Cox's agent saying, when do you want to record this radio? Anyway, and then it gets even more ridiculous because Brian later told me, he said, yeah, what happened was Alan Cox's son, who's also an actor, was over in New York at his apartment visiting and went to the toilet, and Brian had this big stack of scripts and books. And Alan went to the toilet, and Brian heard Alan laughing in the toilet. And when he came out, Alan had the Bob Servant thing, and he said, well, whatever this is, Dad, you should do it.
Wow.
And that was, so this chain of events.
That's amazing.
Wow.
And that's what got him on board. It's nuts.
That's amazing.
That's insane.
That's so good.
Usually you just get like newspapers in your toilet, whatever. He's got a stack of scripts
I know.
to go through.
Probably signed an NDA for everyone as well.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was great. And then he came up and did it. Well, he came up and did the radio. So we recorded that in probably a day, maybe 2 days in Pacific Key. And Brian, I hadn't physically met him, and he came up to the thing, and he did Question Time the night before, and he had this very famous argument with Simon Shamma, the historian, when he had a big bust up, and he came up, and I think he must have had a late dinner with Dimbleby or something. So he came up, looked a bit bedraggled, and he came in, and we did a quick run through, and he read the script, and he turned around and he went, Neil, this is really funny. And he obviously thought that it was very kind, but obviously we were thinking, he's not fucking read the script. This is the first time he's seen them. But it was radio, so you get away with it. But he was, it was just brilliant. I mean, everything about that was so amazing. And even looking back, it seems more amazing that it happened for me, and being so Dundee and not even Dundee, Broughty Ferry focused. Because there were so many funny things that when the books came out first, and I did a few Scottish book festivals around the Bob Servant thing, and whenever I did a Bob Servant event, there'd always be someone at the end that said, oh, I'm from Dundee. And invariably, several times people said, Bob Servant must be based on Charlie Cox. Right now, Charlie Cox was a legendary Dundee newsagent who had a newsagent that was essentially a shed in a hedge, right? So there's this hedge, and within it, you had to sort of part to get to this tiny little newsagent. And he was a sort of eccentric Montefieth newsagent just outside Broughty Ferry. But that's Brian Cox's brother, right?
All right, wow.
So people would say, oh, Charlie Cox, they wouldn't even mention Brian. They'd say, oh, Charlie Cox. And he was this eccentric newsagent, and they would always tell me these funny stories about him. And the funniest one was, they were saying, one guy said he went to Montefieth High, and he went in a full school uniform one day and bought some chewing gum, and he was going to school, and Charlie Cox went, that's great, I've got no change, would you take a cabbage?
I think he used to run comedy gigs in Dundee. So you get paid
I
for
got
that
paid in a cabbage.
Big bag of cabbage. Docks, you got docks a couple of cabbages.
Yeah, we flung at Steve during the performance.
But then, so anyway, they told me this, and when Brian came to the radio, I thought, well, I'm not going to tell him about that because he might think it's a bit offensive that his brother. Anyway, and then he did a Reporting Scotland interview that night about being back in Scotland and doing something from Dundee, and he said in the interview, to be honest, the person it really reminds me of is my late brother Charlie. So wow. Incredible. So I then told him that story, and he loved it. So in the second series of Bob Servant, I put that in. So there's a scene that makes no sense where this woman goes to the counter and buys a burger, and he says, I've got no change, would you take a cabbage?
Wow.
And he puts a cabbage on the counter, and me and Brian are cracking up, and everyone's like, what's the relevance of that?
That's amazing.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, that's great. And look at him now. So you kickstarted his career, I would say.
It's not
just a young whippersnapper when you took him in.
Do you know the maddest thing I seen was there was an old episode of French and Saunders on about a year ago I was watching, and they had a sketch in it, and it was Brian Cox, and it was basically Succession, but it was.
Yeah.
But like it was his daughters, and it was like I put it on Twitter because it was like I think it was like Abby Titmus was in it or something.
Wow. It's all coming full circle.
Yeah. It was like French and Saunders, and like there's some other kid. It was like Denise Van Outen or something like that. Was with all his daughters vying for, and it was like even they had some name of the news corporation. I'm like, this is
Really?
fucking Succession, but it's the French and Saunders sketch.
Yeah.
Well, do you know he played? He was in Frasier as well. He played.
I seen that the other day. Actually, I
what's
think
her name? Daphne, is it?
Daphne Moon's dad.
Daphne,
Aye.
Yeah.
Unreal.
No, he's had an amazing career, but no, he's definitely. I mean, I'm really really pleased he's had this incredible Indian summer sort of thing. He's had this real, I feel he's got the recognition now he sort of deserves. Because he did theatre for decades when he was young, and then he sort of almost reluctantly went into Hollywood and got a bit mistreated on a couple of occasions there and things. But he's great. He's such a brilliant actor and a funny man. Lots of funny things. I remember we when we were doing Bob Servant, we shot a bit in Glasgow, and I stayed in the same hotel as him. And at night we would sort of sit and have a glass of wine, and we'd been exhausted. And for me, it was just like, it's just brilliant. And he was just talking about Dundee and all that stuff. And he's got such an incredible story, Brian. And anyway, I remember one time we were really tired and I said, so what are you doing next? And he said, well, last year I shot a Max Bygraves biopic that I played the lead in, and it's coming out, so I'm doing press for that. And I was thinking, Max Bygraves biopic? Like, a kind of light entertainment guy from the 80s. I was like, who has made that? And who has cast Brian? So I was like, that's fucking weird, but I was so tired. I was like, fine. So I went to bed, woke up in the morning. First thing I thought, what's Max Bygraves like this? So anyway, went to the set. I got there first, and I was on the set, and I saw Brian's car pull up, and he got out, and he looked very, very flustered. Looked like he had a troubled night's sleep, and he was like, "Where's Forsyth? Where's Forsyth?" And I was like, well, fucking, he was stumbling across the set, and then he couldn't get past his camera, and he just went, "Matt Busby." Anyway, so that's what he played. He played Matt Busby, not
That
Bygraves.
makes a lot more sense.
That's
The
great.
Bygraves babes. I read an interview, I don't know if you want to talk about this or not, but about you going out to America and selling scripts and stuff over there.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in how all that works. And
Yeah, well, again, this huge bit of luck to kick it all off, which was I got married 2010, and when we went on honeymoon, my wife and I, to Italy, I was pretty skint at the time, but I had this little scam going, which I used to do on holidays, where I'd email the hotels and I'd suggest I was a travel journalist. And I'd done some travel journalism, so it wasn't too ridiculous, but I'd say, look, I'm in the area, and I might be doing a review. Anyway, so I'd email like 10 hotels, and one would write back and say, "I'll go on then. If you come on a Monday, we'll give you." So that's what happened. So we went to Tuscany on holiday. My wife's like, God, we have to keep packing up. So we did 2 nights in all these places. And anyway, did one night at this 5-star Tuscany hotel. They said, if you stay on a Monday, we'll do all this stuff. So anyway, got there and went down to the pool, and the little restaurant was full, right? So went down, we're leaving, and the waiter went, well, there's a pair over there, there's a couple on a table for 4. And it was this American couple. And he said, do you mind if they sit down? And they went, yeah, no, it's fine. So we sat down, and they were nice, we were just chatting away. And he said, what do you do? And everything. And he was the head of TV at DreamWorks, Spielberg's company. Unbelievable,
Wow.
So I've obviously just started pestering this poor bloke.
you've got the brass neck to be in there in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he loved that story. He loved the fact
Yeah.
I'd got in like that. Because remember him saying it was a bit like Spielberg, how he got Universal Studios, he pretended he worked there and stuff.
Yeah.
So he quite liked the fact I'd kind of talked my way in. And then and he said, would you have any ideas that might work in America? And I had this idea that I'd worked up, and I sent it to him. And then the next day he came and found me at the pool and said, well, come on, you come LA and pitch it. And by 2 months later, I was in Hollywood pitching this idea with him, from sitting next to him in this.
That's amazing.
It's incredible, isn't it?
And sold it to ABC. It was mad. So, and then I got an American agent, and so I think I sold 6 pilot scripts over there, and it's amazing. Like I find it really exciting. You go over, and I don't know if any of you have been over there yet, but it's it's just so intense, and you get your hire car and you're sweating, and you go to the studios, and it's not quite the same now, pilot season, but when I was there, it was like you went in August, you went around the 5 studios, pitch your idea, you got maybe 15 minutes, and sometimes they would tell you in the room if they wanted it. If not, they tell you like the next day. And I'd go for a week and just hammer these meetings out and try and sell it, and you're just waiting, and a lot of reject, and then trying to, and it was you're going to Fox Studios and Universal and things, and it's I find it really nerve-wracking to be honest. It's intense. Like,
Yeah,
must be.
that sounds really intense. And I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard you can like make a living just from selling pilot scripts.
Easily. Now, yeah, I think it's harder now, but when I was there, the maths were in the summer, every studio would order 100 scripts. In January, they'd film about 10 to 15 pilots from those scripts, and then in March they'd pick up maybe 2 to 3 to take to series. So the statistics
Sifting for gold.
are like 2% or something that you'll get to. So that but you got paid a lot of money to write the pilot script. So yeah, it was definitely a world in which you could do a living from that.
I've always found that quite daunting, that thing, when it comes to script writing, and particularly for TV and all that like, you know, the likelihood of it ever getting to air is so low. I actually remember went to a thing at BBC Scotland years ago, and you were like, it was like a sort of thing about giving advice to new writers and stuff, and you were on the panel, and I always remember thinking like then just about like, just how hard, and everybody's sharing their stories about how hard it is to get stuff going on. Of like, how's that experience been for you in terms of like, you just kind of need to keep hammering away and then trying to get one over the line kind of thing, like, and what advice would you give to like people who try to get stuff done?
Rejection is part of the business, always will be, no matter what level you get to, is part of the business, and you've got to get good at handling rejection. You've got, and not see it as rejection weirdly, just see it as a statistical likelihood, you know, and often it's not about the script. It's often there's other things in development that are similar, or they tried that a few years ago and it didn't work, you know, all that stuff. But also don't put all your eggs in one basket, you know. I don't spend 5 years on one script and think, no, this is it, you know, this means a lot to me and I've got a real connection to this story. And you've got to have a few things going. And, you know, you can, some of the themes that you've explored in a script, you can do in another way, in another story, you know, move it over. And nothing's ever over. You know, you can get interest in a script from years ago sometimes, but also you reuse stuff. I reuse things, you know, like there's in this new series of Guilt, there's a whole monologue which I keep forgetting I've taken from an old script, but I'd love to see the producer's face when it goes out. I'm legally covered with that, don't want to say. It's a turnaround, but you know,
doesn't involve a cabbage, does it?
It's a 45-minute cabbage. It's you know, nothing's ever wasted, and also you've become a better writer from writing a script, no matter what it is. So whether that goes into production or not would be amazing, but you've still become better. You've still learned something, and you might even have learned that this is not something you want to do, that area or that genre. You've just got to keep working away. You know, I'll still have more things turned down than get picked up. You know, that's just the nature of it.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask a wee bit about your process as well, how you write, because me and Stu write a wee bit together. Have you ever written with other people? Have you only written yourself?
I've done a bit of co-writing, and I've never enormously enjoyed it, to be honest.
No, neither do we.
No, well, you were saying that before we started.
I enjoy it.
and that's with some really good writers as well. But I think because I started as writing books as well, it's a quite singular approach, and I'm kind of just used to it. And I kind of just I very much realised that I'm a kind of soul writer, which I quite enjoy, because you still have collaboration from producers and directors and actors and things. It's still, you know, it's not like writing a book. You still feel, there's a nice bit at the end where you're actually working with other people.
How do you deal with like writer's block and stuff? Do you get that a lot?
I don't really. I think realizing that some days will be more productive than others, you know, that's just the nature of it. If I give myself sort of longer term targets, you know, sort of, right, I've got 4 weeks to write this script. You know, if I've got an outline after 10 days, I'll be in pretty good shape, and sort of think about it like that, and don't give myself, at certain points I'll say, right, I've really got to hammer this now. I'm going to smooth 10 pages a day of this script, and then, but it just getting on with it, protecting my time, I think is the most important thing, and recognizing the time I write best, which is mornings. So trying to protect that and do any meetings or anything else in the afternoon. But no, I kind of, I think it's realizing that, kind of taking that slightly more longer term approach. Like if you have a day where just things come up in your life and you don't get much done, don't kill yourself with it, because think, well, let's see where I am in a week, you know, and kind of not get too stressed with it.
Do you try and keep regular hours?
Yeah, well, mornings is the big one for me, and Like I try and several days a week, if I wake up very early, I'll kind of sneak downstairs and try and do an hour or two before, life sort of starts. And if I can get that little hour in, I feel great, for the morning. I feel like I've kind of, it's like doing exercise first thing, you feel God, I've got that done. So yeah, mornings is the big one for me. I used to write a lot in the evenings, but I kind of don't do it anymore. But also what I'm trying to do is not take on, like for a long time, I was in the stage just say yes to everything because, for a financial necessity, and also just because you never know if you'll get other opportunities. And like last year was really, really full on. So what I'm trying to do now is think, right, fingers crossed, I'll in a position that'll hopefully make shows, every couple of years maybe, and just not making a show is stressful, particularly if you do a big 6-parter. It's hard work. So let's try and make the writing year not too stressful. Let's try and take a day a week off, or at least a couple of afternoons, and so try not to kind of kill myself with schedules.
Aye. That's the thing that I've always found really difficult with stand-up, because because I like to read like loads of books and it's like I've got that one on the War of Art, and it's all about trying to overcome what he calls resistance, basically writer's block or procrastination or whatever. And like I love reading things by writers and authors and things like that about how to write, but we need to go out at night and fucking go up on stage and try the stuff. And see, it's always hard, I think, getting that balance between gigging enough but also writing enough. And sometimes you're either doing like full on with one or full on with the other. And like right now, I'm just about to start working on a new show, and I'm like, I could do with a couple of fucking months off of gigging to just write and then take it off on stage. But effectively, you never get that luxury. You always need to kind of do both at the same time.
Comes back to making money as well. Like we need to go out and
exactly,
because we write scripts and stuff, but also do stand up. And like it's hard, to write. I'd love to write in the morning, but when you've been gigging and you're not back till like 1:30 in the morning, and the whole thing you're just chasing your time. It's a lot in it.
No, that must be hard. Then the kind of nocturnal life, and then trying to write in the afternoons. But half the time in the afternoon, you must be thinking, right, I've got to get going to
the next one.
You've always got that. And if you've got a gig the following night, you've always got that gig hanging over you a bit. And if you're trying to write, even if it's stuff that you're not going to try that night, you're still kind of thinking, but is this going to work in that restaurant in Broughty Ferry or whatever?
And it never does. It never does.
I actually think that the net fishing chill's a good line, to be honest.
I'll stand by it. Because you'd mentioned there about you might have something in development and someone else has something similar, and I wanted to ask about this. If you don't want to talk about it, we can cut it out. But about the gold. So there was something similar, like about the Brinksmat robbery on Channel 4, The Curse.
Right, yeah.
And how
maybe this is news to Neil now. You've just broken his heart.
So how do you deal with that when you hear that news and you're like,
it's kind of okay. I know Tom a bit, and and I didn't watch it sort of deliberately because I thought, well, there's no upside to that, because if there's something similar, you think, well, I'm not going to change it. We were already in pre-production.
Yeah.
So I think it was okay. It was a half-hour comedy, so I kind of felt that it probably wouldn't step in it too much, to be honest. And so that was fine. I mean, there's been films done about it and documentaries and things. The big fear is that a big drama would have got announced, and that's what I was kind of scared of when we're waiting for the green light. That at any moment, Sky announced they're doing a Brinksmat drama or something. So it's a kind of popular, it's a well-known story. So other treatments of it that are slightly different are not a problem, I think.
Yeah, because I mentioned that because I'd written a thing about like living with a refugee. It's something I'd done in stand-up, and then Channel 4 came out with a home, and that's just killed it straight away. And it's just something that maybe, I don't know if that was something that you'd had conversations with like with producers or like commissioners or anything when that came out. Was it like, though, this could just stop now?
I don't think it was seen as a sort of direct comparison, because it was different genre, half hour, Channel 4. I think that was okay. But I think if an ITV or Sky had announced a Brinksmat drama when we were waiting for the green light, I think that could have easily been a problem.
Right.
I've wanted for years to do something about Lockerbie, but then I think last year 2 Lockerbie dramas got announced, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna. I'd be surprised if I got something away now on that. So that's the risk you're taking with true stories.
I remember, it's funny you mentioned that, because I remember when I was at uni, like before my last year at uni, before I started really doing stand up, me and my mate Nick were convinced we were going to write a script, and we'd both worked in supermarkets. So we thought, we're going to write this supermarket sitcom. And then that year, that thing Trolleyed came out on Sky One. And I remember like reacting to the news as if I'd already had a script commission. And then
And they'd stolen the idea.
We were so far
This
away.
vague idea of mine stolen.
And I was like, no, my dream is crushed.
They've stitched me up like a kipper.
You must have took the idea that someone must have overheard it. And took it.
Someone got our text. All of the text.
It was during the time of the phone hacking scandal.
Is there any sort of ideas you would? By the way, I don't know how long we've done. And
We've got 50 minutes, so I get.
Yeah, don't worry.
Thank you.
Got 5 minutes left.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine.
I don't want to keep you all day. But is there any, like, I think it's great advice to not get too precious about one idea and to have other irons in the fire. But and maybe you don't want to spunk it on here anyway. But is there sort of ideas that you always return to and you're like, that I really want that to be something one day?
I've got this idea for a sort of film set in Dundee that I've been playing with for about kind of, I don't know, 10 years that maybe could become something at some point. But
Bob Servant, the movie.
yeah,
The cabbage ears.
should be able to rustle up a healthy budget for that, family friendly. So no, I mean there's little bits and pieces, but to be honest, I'm trying to just focus on one or two shows. I mean, the great thing if you make these 6-parters is it's like 2-3 years of work, so it's quite nice. Just concentrating on one thing for a period and not jumping between projects where you can get a bit schizophrenic, really.
And you'd mentioned this again, if you don't want to talk about it, but you'd heard that when you were out pitching in LA, or I think it was, you stayed with Sacha Baron Cohen. Is that right?
No, I didn't stay with him, but I did. So Guilt, I actually pitched in LA with Sacha Baron Cohen's company.
All right. Well,
He wasn't there, but his company, I know the guy that runs it, and they're set up in these little offices in the bottom of his garden, which is this vast LA sort of mansion, and it's nuts. You walk down and there's the garage, and it's got like the Borat little truck, or the thing that he drove and stuff. There's all these props around, and I was working up the pitch, and he said, "Oh, just go and use the pool house." So I was in this like pool house, which is bigger than my house, considerably, and I was like, "This is crazy," and then thankfully didn't sell it, because if I'd sold Guilt over there, I'd probably got a pilot script commission that wouldn't have got made, and it's very hard legally to get ideas back from America, so it would have just now to be gone. So I'm very thankful actually that didn't sell it over there.
and if you had this vision of having like 3 series in America, they probably would have wanted like 10 seasons.
Yeah, well, it's just been optioned in the States for people to try and remake it actually.
Wow.
So see if that happens. It got remade in India. I don't know if you
Oh,
saw
did
that.
it?
Yeah.
I don't know that.
It got
That's
remade.
cool.
It's called Bloody Brothers. And it's hilarious. The trailers on YouTube. It's they remade it. It's so funny. I had these calls with the Indian writing team, and they were really nice and funny. And they said, we're going to do. I think they did like 8 episodes. And I said, how are you going to do that? And they went, we've got other story. And he said, for example, like Guilt begins with them driving home from a wedding, for series 1, and he said you can't tell Indians there's been a wedding and not show them the wedding. So they did. They did a whole episode 1 on the wedding before it even got to the
Without
drama.
any drama, and it's just a nice.
Just a really nice wedding.
That's great.
Is that like the dream then? It becomes like The Office and it just gets remade all over the world kind of
Oh
thing?
yeah, well you never know, but it's gone out all around the world. I get sent these title cards, and it's renamed in different countries and things. It's nuts. I mean, it really is crazy to see it going out subtitled. I went out in America and on PBS and things, which is that's a sort of dream for me as well. Like I was obsessed with American TV when I was young, and that's funny. Like when it goes out, because I always look on Twitter and it's always these American women saying, "What the hell?" and like they can never understand anything, but they seem to watch it every week, and they all like Eamon Elliott, but they can't. They've no clue what's going on or any of the accent.
Brilliant. That's
Must be
great.
so cool to see. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's exciting, and it's but yeah, it's over. It's over next week.
Yeah. And it was funny that you'd mentioned on your Twitter that publications keep saying it's been axed and stuff. You're like, no, it's not been axed. I've written it.
know.
It's fine. It's finished.
It's ridiculous, clickbaity thing. There was 2 stories the other day. think the Mirror said BBC series sensationally axed, and I replied saying it's a self-axing, lad. It's a trilogy. And then the Sun said we'd been scrapped. That was the other one.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings
Yeah.
scrapped after 3 movies. That's great.
That's great. I think that we've taken up too much of your time.
Yeah.
Thanks so much
Thanks so much
for being here.
No.
I guess it's just Guilt that you want to plug to our humble audience.
Where can people find it?
Guilt, it's all episodes are on iPlayer from Tuesday the 25th. Is that Tuesday? I think that's the 25th. And then it also goes out on BBC Scotland channel Tuesday the 25th at 10 o'clock, BBC 2 Thursday the 27th at 9 o'clock. All episodes of The Gold also on iPlayer. All my books available in newsagents and charity shops.
And Bob Servant's still just up on a bootleg on YouTube as well. If you want to watch
That's fine. That's good to get out to the fans. No, thanks for having me. And I'm a big fan of this podcast. I want to say.
thanks
very
very
much.
much. It's a pleasure.
It's great to have you here.
Yeah, brilliant.
Good.
Aye.
Thanks for having me.
Before we go, just a quick reminder, please remember to like and subscribe on YouTube, give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you can follow us at SummerPod on Instagram, TikTok and Twitter, and send anything you'd like to ask us to summerpod@gmail.com. But thanks a lot for listening, guys, and
Cheers.
we'll speak to you soon.
Cheers.
Cheers,
Thanks,
Neil. That was
Thanks for having
great.
me.
Thanks
Ajit,
very much.
thanks a lot.
Yeah,
great.
thanks so much, man.
Cheers.